Hello, and welcome to History on Blast, Episode 5. What day is it? In today's episode, we're going to be putting pretty much a bunch of people who made calendars on blast for managing to make history the most confusing thing ever, and also fucking up how days work on a pretty regular basis. But first, this month in history. In 1840, two women who had become known to history for telling the patriarchy exactly how much they could go fuck themselves first met at an anti-slavery convention in London. Being women, they were barred from the convention floor and told not to worry their pretty little heads about any of the actual serious work and discussions taking place. So they did what any well-reared woman would do. They went back to the States, got their girls together, and 8 years later they hosted their own convention with blackjack and feminism. On July 19, 1848, the Seneca Falls Convention, organized by Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, actually began. They put forth the Declaration of Sentiments and Grievances and declared that men and women are created equal. And thus, the women's rights movement was born. And so, back to calendars. So we're going to start with the oldest of the three fairly recent calendar systems that I'm planning on talking about, which would be the Julian calendar. Now, this one was established during the consulship of Julius Caesar, yes, of being stabbed repeatedly fame. And on the whole, it was actually pretty all right. They had figured out the length of a year, more or less. They had figured out that the whole, leap year thing was something that they needed to worry about because the orbit of the Earth around the sun isn't exactly a round number of days. So they made up leap years to deal with it during the reign of Augustus, Caesar Augustus. But it still had some inconsistencies because their leap year wasn't perfect, and they were doing it every 4 years rather than the more complicated formula that would be made up for the Gregorian calendar that we're going to get into in a minute. But so there are a couple other issues with the Julian calendar. Most notably, the fact that the Romans were really big into people. Like, their whole time system and record keeping was very largely based on, oh, this important dude over here. So they'd be like, this was 20 years before Julius Caesar was born. Or this was 20 years after Julius Caesar was born. And then you end up with these weird moments of trying to figure out exactly how dates line up. Where you're like, well, they never actually gave me when this happened based on anything useful. I have it based on when this guy was born, but I have his birthday dated based on when this guy was born. And now all of these assholes have me chasing my tail trying to figure out when anybody was actually born. But that's more of a Rome problem than a Julius Caesar problem. Now, what this does end up with is somewhere between 4 and 6 years of potential inaccuracy in the Julian calendar, because there was a big question of when exactly was Jesus born. And if you hear birds in the background, there's really not too much I can do about that because they've decided to roost outside my window. So I guess that's just something we're going to have to live with now. So moving on from the Julian calendar, this got replaced with the Gregorian calendar. Let's go within 1582. Now, the actual answer here is that the rollout of the Gregorian calendar was really silly and done over a period of time because each individual country had to declare, yeah, we're in, sure, why not? And this was initially put forth by Pope Gregory XIII, which means you get things like Protestant Germany being like, we don't want your papal bullshit. We're going to keep our Roman calendar. Okay, sure. And then eventually they had to give in because everybody else was using it. England was actually the last holdout, which led to this really funny day when Parliament voted, yep, we're using the Gregorian calendar now, and then just kind of changed the date overnight. So it went from the 2nd to the 14th for the entirety of the British Empire. And a lot of people in England were really upset and they wanted their 11 days back, damn it. Benjamin Franklin goes on record as actually having thought it was funny, because there comes a time in a man's life where he really appreciates going to sleep on the 2nd and not having to get out of bed until the 14th. Just a quick correction, though, since I realized before I said that England was one of the last holdouts. They did wait until 1752 to adopt the Gregorian calendar, but they were by no means the last bitter clinger, shall we say. No, that award has to go to Russia, who didn't adopt the Gregorian calendar until after the revolution that resulted in the Soviet Union, which puts the adoption of the Gregorian calendar in Russia in 1918, and, as an aside, really screws up their whole October Revolution, December Revolution thing, because it happened in a totally different month. Now, because of some of the issues with the inaccuracy of dates in the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar may or may not be missing approximately 4 to 6 years. Plus, there's some potential mistakes because of things like the fact that Caesar Augustus ruled for a period of time as Emperor Octavian before changing his name to Emperor Caesar Augustus, which leaves us with more of that weird Roman we base everything on dudes in our timeline inaccuracy. Sure. Alright. But either way, both this is the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar, they both have, 12 months and 7-day weeks. Everything is fine. There are 365 days, give or take some leap year, and everything is fine. Well, then France decided to have a revolution, and it wasn't just enough for them to, cut off Louis's head. They needed to also have a massive social uprising, and on the whole, the French Revolution is an entire other mess, and they really, they really fucked that one up. But one of the things that they did along the way is they decided that they needed a new revolutionary calendar to divorce themselves from the Catholic papacy-induced calendar thing that is the Gregorian calendar, because really, it was based very heavily on saint days and the holidays of the Christian calendar, specifically Catholicism and all of that. And they were like, cool, we're gonna make our own calendar with blackjack and hookers. Only more like with celebrations of the Republic and plant metaphors. And decimals, because the French Revolution was really, really into everything being decimal, which is to say that they actually, at one point, someone tried to make the clock of the new French Republic, and it was split up into, 10-minute intervals, or, everything was divisible by 10, everything was base 10, It was like metric on steroids. But so that they were like, all right, let's new calendar. We're going to make it more closely tied to the seasons. We're going to not worry about Catholic holidays. We're not going to worry about any of that. And what we end up with is the calendar of the French Revolution, which had 12 months with 10-day weeks. Every month is exactly 30 days long, and depending on if it's a leap year or not, there are 5 or 6 random days hanging out at the end of the year that were a celebration of the Republic and the liberties of man and the working people, and basically they brought back the whole Saturnalia concept, honestly. They brought back the idea of a bunch of days that just kind of chill out at the end of the year and they aren't really part of anything, and we're gonna not work and we're gonna spend that entire time having a festival, but really it's in that weird nebulous place between December and January, so everything's covered in snow and frozen anyway, so nobody wants to work. So party! The calendar of the French Revolution was officially adopted October 24th, 1793, and it wasn't abolished until 1806 by Napoleon, which means that they got a good solid 13 years out of that thing, which not bad, really. So to fully appreciate how utterly bizarre this calendar is, if you're listening to this episode on the day that it was released, which would be the 24th of July in 2018, the date according to the French Revolutionary calendar is 6 Thermidor 226. Yep, 226, because the entirety of this calendar is based on time since the French Revolution. The other things to note with the revolutionary calendar is that I guess they decided that they didn't like the days of the week, so they replaced them with Primidi, Duodi, Tridi, Quatordi, basically 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, until you get to 10 day. Yeah. And then they named the months so that they were things like Vendémiaire, which basically means harvest, like the grape harvest. Then you get Brumaire, which comes from fog, Frimaire, like frost, and it goes like that. So you get the rainy month, the month where things are blooming, the month with flowers, the month of prairies. They were trying to be really, really pastoral, and look how cool farmers are. You know, just generally very down with the bourgeoisie. So it makes sense that it was removed when Napoleon was the emperor of France and things were going back to their classist roots and, you know, stricter hierarchy, less focus on farming and poor people being cool and bread for everybody and all of that. They did, however, in 1871 briefly bring back the calendar of the French Revolution in Paris for 18 days. I don't know why, I just know that they did. That's pretty much what I've got for you on calendars today. If you've got any feedback you'd like to send my way, you can do that on Twitter. I'm at HistoryOnBlast, or you can email me at historyonblast@gmail.com. I'd like to thank the band Defy the Mall for the use of their song Keeper of Histories for the intro and outro of our program. And as always, thanks for listening.